Hello and welcome to today's flight. Today is a remake of a video I did recently comparing real-world footage with X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. We did the Bellevue arrival, we flew over the Seattle stadiums and landed at Boeing Field. Although I think in that case it wasn't a fair comparison because there were some things about Microsoft Flight Simulator that I was unfamiliar with. So I did a remake of it and included the same real-world footage. Here we are coming up to Bellevue, doing the Bellevue arrival. And here is Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And I actually, having flown it now for a couple of months, have become quite fond of it. In fact, it's my favorite flight simulator now. This is X-Plane 11, which I have flown for actually several years now and use it for flight training, specifically for instrument flight training. And it's a wonderful tool, but I have to say that when compared to Microsoft Flight Simulator, it just doesn't have the real-world feel that Flight Simulator does. Flight Simulator actually is quite stunning in its ability to replicate the real world. And I had some lens distortion in the first video I did, which again, a lot of it was unfamiliarity with the product. And now that I'm familiar with it, I was able to recreate the underwing view. I was able to correct the lens distortion, and I am quite pleased with the outcome. Here we are flying over the Bellevue, the city of Bellevue, in X-Plane 11. X-Plane 11 does a great job, but again, when compared to Flight Simulator 2020, I think it really doesn't touch it. Flight Simulator clouds are phenomenal, very, very much like real world. It is a very, very excellent VFR experience. If you look here, you almost feel like you're flying in the real thing. It compares quite remarkably to the real world footage. And it's really cool that I was able to get to underwing camera just like I have it in the real airplane. Back to X-Plane 11, which is, it's looking good. But there's a certain grayness, a certain unrealistic feel to it overall. I will say that I did not include X-Plane 12 because I really don't like the product. I think the lighting is terrible. It has some good attributes, but it really wasn't worth including in this comparison because until they fix that lighting issue, it's very, very dark, difficult to see instruments. Ground contrast is too stark, and frankly, it just didn't make sense to even include it in this footage. I now almost exclusively fly Flight Simulator, even in my flight training and online with Pilot Edge. Just look at those reflections on the water, the magnificent clouds, the very, very realistic photogrammetry they were able to recreate. It just feels like the real thing. Look how that sun reflects off the water, quite remarkable. Back here to X-Plane 11, and it just has a very dull feel to it. I, again, was a great fan of X-Plane 11. I still think it has some advantages over Flight Simulator with respect to the systems on the airplane, programmability with weather. There are some advantages that it has, but overall, it just doesn't have the real-world feel that Flight Simulator does, and I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to it, frankly, until they make some vast improvements on X-Plane. I'm going to stick with Flight Simulator, so my apologies to anyone that I might have misled in my previous video. Again, a lot of it was unfamiliarity with the product. Here we are coming up on the I-90 bridge. We just saw the footage in the real world. 4K underwing camera, the GoPro Hero 11. And now here's a close-up as we approach the west end of I-90 bridge, and there's the Seattle skyline with those beautiful clouds in the background. And here's X-Plane, same view coming up on the I-90 bridge. If you look at the water, it just has a very dull feel to it. You know, I was quite satisfied with X-Plane 11 until I started flying Flight Simulator 2020, and then I was just like, I don't know if I could go back to that, frankly. So here we are as we approach the end of the I-90 bridge, the west end there in X-Plane 11. There's the Seattle skyline in the distance. And I will say that I have the enhanced Seattle scenery for both the X-Plane and for Flight Simulator 2020. Back to real world footage, west end of the I-90 bridge. And we got a clearance to fly over the stadiums and on to runway 14 left at Boeing Field. So here we are coming up onto the stadiums. There's the downtown Seattle Flight Simulator 2020 as we approach the stadiums. You'll notice the skyline looks a little bit gray, but that's quite realistic because that's how it looks in real life before you get close to it. X-Plane 11 again approaching the stadiums. There's the Seattle skyline looking good. Back to real world. There you see the stadium in the distance, the football stadium, and here we are coming up on it. And that is Lumen Field. I think it's CenturyLink in both flight simulators because those graphics were done before it changed over to Lumen Field. There we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Look at those cloud reflections on the water, magnificent. X-Plane 11, there you can see the stadium in the distance coming up on it here. There's Lumen Stadium, the football stadium, the baseball stadium to the left where the Seattle Mariners play. Back to real world footage. And there we have the Seattle skyline coming alive as we get close to it, Lumen Field. And back to Flight Simulator 2020. And then we make our turnout over Lumen Field for left base, runway 14 left, back to X-Plane 11. Good detail in Lumen Field. Also in the Seattle Mariners baseball stadium. They're looking good, but they just don't look quite as lively as Flight Simulator 2020. Here we are back to real world, getting ready to make our left base turn for runway 14 left. The other thing Flight Simulator does is the ground animation is just absolutely fabulous. Even in the replay, you can see all the traffic moving down there. There's in CenturyLink Stadium, which is actually Lumen Field. Back to X-Plane 11, coming up on CenturyLink Stadium. That's looking pretty good, but you just don't see, in the replay mode, you don't see any movement, any animation on the ground. That's just a feature of X-Plane 11. They did fix that in X-Plane 12. But again, I'm just not flying X-Plane 12. There's a nice close-up in real world of Lumen Field. And T-Mobile Park right there, Seattle Mariners Stadium. And we're on our left base for 14 left. Now we're switching back over to Flight Simulator 2020. Great detail, nice reflections. Look at the reflections off of T-Mobile Park there. Very, very lively. And there's X-Plane 11 making our flyover of T-Mobile Park. Again, you just don't get those reflections. And here we are back to real world. Getting ready to turn final, runway 14 left. We'll be going over the same terrain in Flight Simulator and X-Plane 11, so you can get a comparison. There in the distance you can see Boeing Field as we get ready to align with runway 14 left. And back to Flight Simulator. And I also have to say that the sound effects in Flight Simulator were very much superior to X-Plane 11. There you can see some animation on the ground. Good colors in the trains. And back over to X-Plane 11 as we turn final, runway 14 left. Good ground detail, just doesn't have that punch, that liveliness. It kind of looks, well, it doesn't look realistic. And there you see runway 14 right and 14 left in the distance, back to real world. Now the propeller you notice in real world, it's just because of the video effect. It just doesn't look like it's spinning. And back to Flight Simulator 2020. Just absolutely fabulous. It took some time to get familiar with all the nuances and the programming and putting together the video, camera position, and all of those things. But once I started to get it figured out, it was a no-brainer for me. Back to X-Plane 11. And there we're almost lined up with 1-4 left, passing over the same terrain that we did in the real world footage and Flight Simulator 2020. Here we are back to real world, lined up with 1-4 left there in the distance. That's the shorter runway to the left. That's looking great. I am really looking forward to Flight Simulator 2024. I do hope that they made some improvements in the aircraft systems. And now we're lined up on runway 14 left in X-Plane 11, passing over the same terrain there. Short final in the real world footage. Lots of nice colors down there on the different box cars on the train. That's well replicated in the Flight Simulator. And back to X-Plane 11, short final 1-4 left. That's Mount Rainier off in the distance. You can't see it in Flight Simulator because we have some clouds programmed in there. Tried to keep the weather as similar as I could between the real world footage and both simulators. Short final, 1-4 left. I will say that the Flight Simulator, I do have the Orbix enhanced scenery for Boeing Field. So it's going to look quite superior to X-Plane 11. That is because they do have enhanced airport graphics, courtesy of Orbix. Look at the colors in those train box cars, very well replicated. Even the detail in the ground and the dirt is quite well done in Flight Simulator. Short final, X-Plane 11. I do have the Washington State Orbix scenery programmed into X-Plane 11. Weren't for that, I think it wouldn't even be a close comparison. But I do have the Orbix Washington State scenery package. And back to real world. And getting ready to touch down here. What is remarkable about Flight Simulator is you don't even have to buy a scenery package for it to produce this kind of high quality graphics. The photogrammetry is just phenomenal. And back to X-Plane 11. Again, X-Plane 12 did fix when you do a replay, you do see the animation on the ground, but for some reason X-Plane 11 does not do that, which is quite a detriment. And again, you're going to see Boeing Field is much more plain looking than it is in Flight Simulator 2020, because again, I do have the enhanced graphics. And there you can see the general aviation aircraft on the ground there, parked on the ground to the left. As we pass over those. And you can take notice of the same general aviation parking area as we pass over it here. As we get closer to runway 14 left. Very well done. The grass detail, the trees, the foliage, all looks quite real. Again, a little bit more of a drab look to the greenery, particularly as you get closer, it becomes more and more noticeable. And I will be making more videos with Microsoft Flight Simulator compared to real-world footage. I've flown into a little over 50 airports here in the state of Washington, and I'd like to put together some videos of those airports using Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Getting ready to touch down here. look at that realism. It's just quite amazing. Sometimes I have to do a double take to make sure I'm not looking at the real world footage while watching Flight Simulator. And X-Plane 11. Boy, the clouds in X-Plane, even X-Plane 12, don't do it justice when compared to Flight Simulator. Doesn't even come close to 2020. And the real world airplane. This flight was flown in June of this year. And touching down in Flight Simulator. And finally touching down in X-Plane 11. And we're going to wrap the video up with this real world footage as we turn off the runway. So now that I've redone this, and now that I've become more familiar with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, I have to say that Flight Simulator is the absolute clear winner. And I look forward to doing more videos. I did one recently where I flew over the mountains, over the Cascades, over North Cascades National Park. And I compared that to some real world footage when I flew over Glacier Peak and El Dorado Peak. And I did put a video together, and I will include a link in the description here if you're interested in seeing that. It's quite remarkable. So thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again next video.